Right. So it's just 3 o'clock now. And just to make sure we have enough time to go over everything, I'm just going to review some housekeeping and introduce us all. So welcome to session B7, Inside Out. I'm Ali. I'm one of your facilitators today. And I'm joined by my colleague Nick, who will be also facilitating this session. Before we get started, just a few little housekeeping notes. At the bottom of your screen, you'll notice that there is a Q&A box. Any questions that you have for our presenter throughout the session, please submit them there, and then we will do an audience Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Just make sure that your microphone is on mute throughout the presentation. And this session will be recorded and then uploaded. All attendees will have access to the recording of any of our conference sessions for up to 90 days after the conference, which is great. You'll also note at the bottom, you can select closed captioning if you prefer to have subtitles. We also really would appreciate any feedback that you can provide on the conference and the session. If you go out to the conference platform and go down to where this session, where you join the session, there is a little survey icon that allows you to provide feedback on this session, but also provide feedback on the overall conference at the main platform as well. So we really appreciate your feedback. We'll provide some time for you to complete that at the end of the session. And this kind of goes without saying, but we just ask that everyone is respectful of, questions and thoughts and each other's perspectives. Any abusive or inappropriate behavior obviously will be removed from the session. And if you need to take a break, step outside, talk to someone, please do so. I'll also indicate in the chat, where you can go for assistance, who you can connect with if you need assistance, and the contact information for our event manager for any incident reporting or any inquiries. I will submit that in the chat. Okay, without a further ado, I would like to introduce our presenter today, Roderick Brereton. He is the co-executive director of Urban Rez Solutions Social Enterprise. Rod, thank you so much for joining us today. Really looking forward to this. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. Greetings and good afternoon to everybody. Hoping all is well with you and yours. It is an honor to present here today. And I'm actually, I've made a little bit of a plunge over to this side of the world known as America today. So we're actually in Montgomery, Alabama, of all places. And I've never been here before, but after what America did to our baseball team, I'm not really the biggest fan of America right now. And obviously, with all the political things going on, but that we're here to actually present on what I'm presenting on today. So it's a little bit serendipitous. So again, my name is Roderick Brereton, and I am the one more time, the co-executive director of Urban Rez Solutions Social Enterprise. And yeah, without further ado, I'm just going to start sharing my screen. And one thing that I like to do, I could wait till the end and have questions, but if you have questions that are pressing that you wanted to ask prior to the end, please do just raise your virtual hand and I can definitely make a provision to stop and explain or just to ask or answer any questions that you may have. Okay, so that being said, I'm going to start sharing and obviously I'm going to have to get this all straightened out. Ready to go? So ready to roll? All right. So yeah, please, again, welcome. And please do use the chat if you have something that you would like to share. We would definitely love to hear from you. And the way that we usually work is it's more so of an facilitation. So where there's questions and, I can do my best to answer any questions on the way. I'm just going to actually just change my name here from Team Urban Rez Solutions to Roderick. And I believe we're ready to roll. And obviously it's not a prerequisite, but if you could share or if you could come on camera, that would be also great to see who was with us here today. And yeah, we often can, recognize somebody, or maybe somebody has a great point, but we don't know them by name or by face. And obviously that, can put a little bit of a spin to it, putting a name to a face, or a face to a name, actually. Okay, so again, my name is Roderick Brereton. I am the co-executive director of Urban Rez Solutions, and today I'm going to present an initiative called Inside Out. And I'll let the slides speak for itself, and I'll just obviously walk through the slides and explain in detail as much as I can within the time frame. So here we go. Okay. Okay. So just getting right to the meat and potatoes. Urban Rez Solutions, before we get into Inside Out, is a social change transformation agency. And you may say, what is that? So we recognize for people to actually get in the frame of change in any aspect, um, there has to be a concerted effort towards change. And if we all think about, changing our lives, or making change in any aspect, sometimes change isn't the easiest thing. We always say, Nike says, just do it, but they never show you how. So 20 something years ago, we were working with a large organization called Toronto Community Housing. And they had asked us to work with some of the communities that had been experiencing challenges, that being violence within their communities, obviously, Toronto Community Housing, um, which has obviously the largest housing stock in the country, and I believe second largest in North America. Just based on some of those realities like poverty and marginalization and disenfranchisement. They've experienced quite a bit of disproportionate violence within some of their communities. So we were asked as Urban Rez Solutions to work with two communities in the West End that had experienced quite a bit of violence, but they were actually going at each other for several years, and it almost had become normalized. So initially, when Urban Rez Solutions started, we went in with the notion of providing anger management and conflict resolution from an urban context. And how we got into that was, I'm from actually Scarborough, and I grew up in the Toronto area all my life. And going through school at that point in time, there was starting to be what I guess you could see right now as the outcome of what was initially put into place by systems. So a lot of the persons like myself, who looked like myself and who came from similar backgrounds, but also similar communities, were often finding ourselves from grade one, or sometimes even senior kindergarten, on the bench. We were the bench kids. It was abnormal when we were not on the bench. I often tell a lot of people that I actually grew up. I spent more time in elementary school on the bench than in the classroom, and that is without any exaggeration. So a lot of my friends, a lot of my colleagues, we would meet on the bench, and that's where technically, I guess you could say, it all started to take form. So as the years went by, as the community grew, especially the racialized community, and primarily boys or males, the bench community grew at an alarming rate. And starting from class clowning, but moving into petty thefts and fights and everything else. This bench community started to grow, and we became, I guess, what would be almost known as a gang if we were to actually look at it, from today's sense. And this was an elementary school. So as we matured, and we continued to go through the school system. The bench followed us through junior high and through high school. So my parents, even though I put them through the ringer, coming to the school, through the suspensions and through the detentions and everything else, which actually after the fact, we recognize, the detentions were just a precursor to the actual real detention that was, coming for several of those people who were, noted as the bench kids at that point in time. But the seriousness of the offenses and just the crimes and everything else that were taking place with this demographic became more serious. And it became into, again, the fights became into people bringing knives to school. And as we continue to grow, the shooting started, and this was now within the 80s. So my parents were always very involved in my life, and they were obviously trying to always steer me right. However, I was just attracted to this fast lifestyle and that I'd grown accustomed to. And, at that point in time, I would say I was the self-fulfilling prophecy, in the sense of, this is what they were saying that, people from Scarborough, or Black youth from Scarborough, were like. And I was just actually just adding more fuel to that fire at that point in time of my life. But my parents were very involved, so they said I was going to university, and I had no other choice. And that actually was one of the biggest things I would say that made a huge difference in my life, in the sense of still knowing I had to maintain some aspect of grades. And we had grade 13 at that point in time, and in grade 12 I had to literally start from scratch, in the sense of pulling my socks up while still being a bench kid. So I made it to university. I made it to York University, and just even thinking back about that, it was almost a miracle, because I was never studious. I was never involved in any aspect of academics, but I had to get there, because I couldn't. The punishment from my parents would have been worse than the system. But anyways, um, in university, I gravitated to those people who were similar, like myself, the bench kids who actually made it through themselves. And I befriended a young guy same age as myself, and we became literally best friends because of the affinity and just the similarity that we had within our stories. So there was one incident where I was going to be going to a party, and I couldn't make it at that point in time. And he went, and whatever, I was together, but at that party, he ended up getting shot in his femur. And it was somebody from far that started shooting into a crowd. And anybody familiar with Toronto, it was G. Ross Park, and somebody was shooting from the hill and hit this friend of mine in his femur, and it shattered his femur, and he almost bled to death. So when this happened, I was thinking, after the fact, besides being angry and besides being wanting revenge on who did this to my best friend, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to, when I thought back to all these individuals that looked like me, that came from similar communities right across the city? And it dawned on me at that point in time, when I was in my early 20s, that I needed to now make a change, in the sense of being equipped now with a little bit more education. But and I was doing sociology at that point in time at York University. But I said, there has to be something that has gone wrong. And that made me reflect, and in retrospect saw that there was a lot of common denominators within some of these demographics that I was very familiar with and comfortable with. But then I started seeing some of the flaws, and started hearing some of my mother's voice in my head, in terms of this lifestyle, it's not sustainable, and it obviously is going to lead to problems. So at that point in time was I guess the pre-contemplation of Urban Rez Solutions, and that now would be over 30 years. But we at that point in time, I started to think more about conflict resolution, and looking at my life and where all these issues had started, in terms of obviously the school system, and empowering people then, who again had certain or similar circumstances, became my mission, and in a sense of forming this alliance between other people who had similar visions, but who had similar lived experience, was just then I got all into. And the actual title of our name, Urban Rez Solutions, I was working within the as one of my first jobs within the supportive housing sector. And I came into contact with an indigenous young man at that point in time. And, we saw the common denominators between our communities, that being the Black community and the Indigenous community. Obviously, in a lot of senses, the urban settings were very similar, but they had their unique, you know, their unique values in the sense of obviously urban, and then the reservations where the indigenous people were living also had their unique circumstances. So we merged the two realities. So that urban context is obviously for the city, and the res is for the indigenous realities, and obviously recognizing both communities needed solutions when it came down to violence. Where we started to pull together and to merge this concept called Urban Rez Solutions. So that being said, we started off with anger management, conflict resolution, and we are working again within the city of Toronto in the West End. And we were able to start to diffuse several conflicts where there again had been extreme violence, gun violence, and obviously just an ongoing culture of violence. So, working with partners, Toronto Police, Toronto Community Housing, Toronto Social Services, we were able to do a lot within a 2-year span in the sense of mitigating violence, but also externally, but internally, and understanding, people having the ability to see not just their value, but the promise that existed for, later on in their lives. So as that was going on, and we were able to calm this down, a lot of people, based on our approach, had come back to us and said, "Hey, you know what? We're great at now, diffusing. We're recognizing our triggers. We're recognizing our propensity towards looking at violence as a solution, but where a lot of us are stuck." A lot of us are not, going anywhere. We're just in that same space. So that gave us another, I guess, opportunity to look at where we could now impart different aspects of growth. And this is where the social change transformation came into play. And as I started off by saying, Nike says just do it, but they never show you how. So we went back to the drawing board, went back to the laboratory, and started to put together, merge concepts of how people can change, not from a disempowered standpoint, but from an empowered standpoint, recognizing their propensities, recognizing, what they need to become. As they say, it's never too late to be who you're supposed to be. And that there then became our mantra in terms of empowering people to not just get optimal performance out of potential, but to not be your story and to write your own narrative. So that is a little bit about Urban Rez Solutions. And, that was over 20 years ago. And from then, we actually had never turned back. So today, we're going to talk about our program called Inside Out, where we're working within the criminal justice system and youth justice system to impart social change transformation. And I'll give you a little bit of obviously insight on how we do that and how we go about building rapport and then relationship and empowering people to change. Okay, so that's my story, as they say, and I'm sticking to it. So this is a little bit about our board. We have over 20 staff, actually not just our board, our staff and our board. And again, we've been operating as a nonprofit organization now within this context since 2017. But as Urban Rez Solutions, over 20 years. So in terms of the Inside Out program, I'll give you a little bit of insight on how that works. So during the pandemic, we were approached, actually prior to the pandemic, we were working now with the Ministry of the Solicitor General. And we were working with the Guns and Gangs units out of the Finch West location, pretty much within the Jane and Finch corridor. And we were engaging people who were on probation or provincial parole who had been charged with a gun offense, and just engaging them from a life skill and conflict management perspective. And whatever we do, we give 1,000% in terms of our energy. And one thing is that we know we bring our cultural experience, our lived experience, to all the work that we do, and share experience, because we strongly believe before you can teach, you have to be able to reach. And people recognize the cultural relevance in terms of not just our approach or pedagogy, but just that lived experience and being able to speak the language and being from the certain communities. It definitely has resonated with a lot of people that we've been able to work with. So it had become, I guess you could say, an exemplary model for being able to work with these individuals. So during the pandemic, one of the program managers from the East Detention Center had reached out to us and asked if we were able to do some work with some people who were in custody online, virtually, just based on some of the programming that we did. And we saw this as an opportunity, so we said absolutely yes. So one of the things that we recognized is that for a lot of people who had been convicted of a criminal offense or had been within the criminal justice system or youth justice system, finding traditional work, obviously, putting in your application or your resume or whatnot seemed to be a huge barrier based off of those realities of, that question, have you ever been convicted of a crime or an offense where you've not been pardoned? And several of those individuals had that experience and had not been able to get work. And one of the things that we recognized, and it was also backed by Statistics Canada, for people who had been convicted of a crime, entrepreneurship was a way that they were able actually to outdo their counterparts who were looking for work within this traditional sector or of just employment. And obviously, nobody asks in most cases, what your background looks like, unless it has to do with your work, specifically when it comes down to entrepreneurship. So we looked at pre-employment and entrepreneurship as a way just to engage these young men within the Toronto East Detention Center, but also imparting life skills, again, because it's easy to give somebody entrepreneurship or pre-employment readiness, but if your life skills and just recognizing some of the areas where you may have deficits and hasn't been corrected, then it's pretty much like a hamster on a wheel. Like, we're not going to go anywhere. So we started that process, and we had actually amazing results. Out of the 8 people that we were working with, upon their release, 6 of them actually went into entrepreneurship. And as of today, 5 of those businesses are actually doing extremely well. And they've actually given us the credit in terms of helping them become who they are actually here today. So based off of that, I guess the word got around, and this was a couple of years later now. We were approached by the Solicitor General in terms of a joint project with the Ministry of Children, Community, and Social Services, and also the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism, to work on an initiative just based on the reality of that within the province of Ontario or the city of Toronto, in the sense of where Black community makes up approximately 14% of all the population. And within the provincial system, when it comes down to corrections, we make up almost close to 50% of those people in custody. And here is actually a trivia question. In the youth justice system at the Roy McMurtry Youth Center, out of the 125 youth at last count, which is usually every Friday, can somebody guess or put in the chat, out of those 125 people, how many of those are Black youth? You can either put it in the chat or shout it out, either or. Take a guess, just to give you a little bit of idea of what we're looking at. 90, Not 90, not 110, but close. So the grand total, unless there's anything else coming, 114. So whoever said 115, you are almost there. 114 of those youth in the Roy McMurtry Youth Center are Black youth. So it's needless to say that there's definitely a disproportionate amount of people of African descent or who identify as Black within the youth and adult justice systems. And imparting these life skills, imparting a different aspect of hope, which we define as hustle, opportunity, preparation, and execution in terms of a plan, is what we were tasked to do by this joint ministry effort. So they actually called the initiative, from the government standpoint, the Black Employment Support Program, but we came up with a little bit more of a hip like a slogan for a title for the program, and we call it Inside Out, right? So literally, we work with those individuals inside the facilities, on the units, in the program rooms, or the spaces that are provided for programming, and we also work with those individuals to get them ready while they're inside. And we say if there's no plan, then you plan to fail. So identifying a plan, identifying your propensities, identifying your strengths, and it is a strength-based process where we don't look at the past, but we recognize some of the realities and systemic realities of what's happened in our past. And I mean, and from the reports and evaluations that we've done, they pretty much all say the same thing. But preparing for the present and the future is what we really focused on, and in terms of that social change transformation. So the program is designed to invigorate and empower individuals, and again, just from a standpoint of being culturally relevant, right? So we focus on, obviously, crime prevention and mitigating recidivism, but personal and professional development. And we just put that into one package, and we've been able to do that now going on 3 years within this setting of the provincial spaces where people are in custody within the Toronto area. So again, we work now at the Toronto South Detention Center, the Toronto East Detention Center, and the Roy McMurtry Youth Center. So that being said, our curriculum, very quickly, we look at 4 quadrants or 4 segments that are very important. And the curriculum is 16 weeks. So 4 months, and it's twice a week, and it's approximately 2 hours per session. And I can say, honestly, since we've started, we've got a long waiting list. And because we can't be everywhere at once, pretty much it's been viral within the settings, and a lot of people where there's not, or a lack of programming, have requested our programming. So we look at positive cultural identity. And so obviously the way society and the systems, and again, that self-fulfilling prophecy has rolled out a lot of the cultural aspects of who we are as not just Black folks, but racialized folks or people from certain communities, has been skewed by social media now. Movies and everything that you can name is pretty much put a spin on or painted us with something sometimes we just are totally unaware of. So identifying positive aspects about our culture, identifying necessarily who we are, and how we've become, and who we've become, is a huge aspect of putting a spin on seeing yourself in a different light. So we talked a little bit about the social change transformation. And as you can see, obviously, Jay-Z is a great example of, that social change transformation, taking it from, literally being in the streets and, selling drugs and everything else that he talks about, to becoming now, a philanthropist, and building schools, and, believing in formal education as a viable pathway to income generation. We also look at financial literacy and entrepreneurship, again, as a viable pathway towards change. And a lot of the reasons why there's these disproportionate amounts of community, our community within these spaces are financial reasons, right? We did a study with a professor from Toronto Metropolitan University. And from that study and canvassing, people from the Roy, McMurtry Youth Center, the South, and then the East, the average age, and this is just males, the average age which Black males were asked to come into or contribute to their household was 11 years old. Okay? Think about that. I mean, obviously, we understand, again, there's some realities in our communities that, through some legacy has, become normalized, like, fatherlessness. So, I mean, a lot of these young boys, without a father in the home have been, tasked to provide food on the table, to, provide, I would say babysitting or daycare for their younger siblings and whatnot. So there's a lot of responsibility that we've become aware of that, I mean, the average young person from these communities. And we're not saying everybody has the same, obviously, responsibility or the same reality, but it is one of the stark things that we have now become aware of. So, again, financial literacy and empowerment through entrepreneurship is a huge factor in terms of, turning around your life. And we look at your interests, your personality traits, and your skill sets to act as a GPS when you know those, to be able to move forward on a pathway that is going to be, as we say, no ops or no cops, right? And last but not least, in terms of fulfilling your options or your course requirements when you're doing the program with us, in terms of that 16 weeks, we've got something that a culmination called the Declaration of Change, where people declare their change, not just to their comrades or to the executive or to the administration within the facilities, but to themselves first and foremost. And declaring that change. And as we say, if you can do it there within that setting of incarceration, you could do it anywhere, because obviously within our incarceration, the settings are very challenging, but it's almost a training ground. And we say, obviously, when you can make the best use of your time, as opposed to just playing games and, just thinking of ways to, become a better, not to say criminal, but better at what you may have got there for, when you can see the change and see the change within yourself, it is a best use of your time. Okay. So I talked a little bit about what our program includes right across the board. So we look at developing personal growth, life skills, career exploration. And specifically, we still look at, again, the conflict management strategies. As we know, within the correctional facilities right now, conflict resolution is something that often needed to be taught prior to their engagement with the criminal justice system. So in that sense, anger management, conflict resolution, impulse control, emotional intelligence or social emotional intelligence, overall critical thinking, effective communicating, goal setting, and transferring skills. So a lot of these individuals who have been in the street life have been able to develop coping mechanisms and skill sets that often, they don't attribute or align with regular life, or I guess, living that other part of the life that they may try to live. So imparting, seeing that, a drug dealer, for instance, has different social skills that they may be able to, use within a sales setting that, again, is going to have, a better outcome, as opposed to, incarceration and obviously all the things that come along with the criminal justice system. So recognizing those skills are a huge part of it. And the out part of our Inside Out program focuses on the re-entry or coming back into community after incarceration. And it's actually a bigger part of what we do, in the sense of preparing people with our life stabilization team while they're in custody, Prior to getting out, recognizing what they need to get back on track. So either that be housing, and we work alongside the community reintegration officers and the social workers within these spaces, to obviously to recognize individuals who need this support, but also to build that rapport. And without rapport, we recognize there usually is not a huge relationship thereafter. And we recognize within positive professional relationships, that is actually where the change often takes place, because there's trust and there's actually knowledge of the individual that you're going to be working with, which makes a huge difference for those individuals in that situation. And also within the out part of our program, we focus on workforce development, which we'll be talking about shortly. So our approach, again, just very quickly, we look at prevention and obviously, preventing further involvement within the criminal justice system. We provide those interventions in real time, but we also look at reinvention. And for those individuals, who've been within the criminal justice system, some of them as young as, 11 or 12 years old in the Roy McMurtry Youth Center, and often graduating to adult facilities thereafter, have sometimes a notion of this is what their life is going to be, but sometimes with the correct intervention, they can see a reinvention is feasible, is possible and viable in terms of what they can turn themselves into, and ultimately to be a contributing member of society, and value themselves and value community, and as opposed to taking away from it, adding to it. It is a total different ballgame when people are able to achieve and succeed at that. We kind of talked about this right now, just in terms of our objectives and what participants are able to feel and see. And this is a part of what we've been able to gather from our surveying and our evaluations. So a lot of them talked about just having a new awareness about themselves and their communities, being able to be accountable in a lot of senses for themselves, and recognizing, their actions just don't impact themselves, but they're also their families, their communities, and recognizing an increased sense of self-esteem, which is a critical in the sense of being able to work with yourself and see that there's value and see that there's hope, and actually something else besides what you've been accustomed to can take place in your life that hopefully will bring again a new sense of being and contribution to society. So and optimism about the future. I mean, again, that's a huge factor also, in a sense of, a lot of times when we're meeting individuals as young as 14 or 15, and obviously even when they're in the adult facilities, a lot of them are very pessimistic and don't believe that their lives can change at all. But obviously with investment and belief and recognizing small steps which equate to big moves, is something that we recognize as a huge contributor to building that self-esteem and building character. As I talked about, our programming is 16 weeks, which is 32 sessions, and our group sessions were initially designed to be about an hour and a half, but often we're going into 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And anybody who was to actually ever witness one of these sessions would think that we were in a tutorial at University of Toronto or York University or any college, just based on the frequency of conversation that we're able to achieve with these young people, and these sometimes older men, just based on the investment that they've often been able to make, in terms of just making this change. And it's all voluntary. So staff at the different facilities will give them a tap and say, hey, you might want to get into this, but often they're on their own volition in terms of coming to these sessions. And we've got a very, very low attrition rate. The only time actually people usually leave our programming is when they're released back into community, or when they unfortunately may have to go to, or in reality, go to the penitentiary. Right. So there's a disconnect at that point in time. But, while they're in the facilities, we've got a huge, huge attendance rate, and people definitely seem to appreciate and value that time. So this is what our journey map looks like. So people, when they meet us in the facility, we do our programming. And at that point in time, while building, again, that critical rapport and relationship, we're able to do understand, what their intentions are when it comes down to job, what their again, their skill sets are, what their interests, their personality traits, and being able to align it, and using um, our workforce development team to start to look at some options, and that's often where it starts to take place. And just based on the entrepreneurship piece, we've got quite a few people at this point in time actually working on business plans. You would actually think it may have been an offshoot of Schulich business school, just based on how many people we've got doing business plans at this point in time. And it's actually very amazing to see some of the, not just the intelligence, but the comprehensiveness that these people are putting into their business plans. And without computers and without being able to do the research themselves, they utilize some of the correctional officers to get information from, in terms of their businesses. They often will reach out to their families just to build their business plans. And what we've been able to do in that sense also is get their business plans and get them critiqued by other business people in the community after the fact, and bring them back so that they're able then to obviously continue to tweak and improve on their plans, so that once they're released, there's again a viable pathway towards employment and towards self-investment. And once people are released, again, when we talk about those subsistence supports, that could be helping people apply for social assistance just to get back on their feet, or providing grocery gift cards, so that food doesn't necessarily have to be a huge issue. And when food, putting that food on the table, or a roof over your head is an issue, that often could lead back to recidivism. So recognizing those pieces, we definitely we do a lot of hand holding when people are released, just to stabilize them. And we have that life stabilization team that does that. And once people are able to be, in that mind frame of employment or entrepreneurship, then we continue to do those other referrals, or that continued support towards their ambitions and their goals. Also within the space at the correctional facility, we do one-on-one. Actually, we do group sessions, and in the Toronto South Detention Center, often we may have up to 20 people. And there's actually, in most cases, that Toronto, like I'll use the Toronto South as an example, there's supposed to be 40 people, but sometimes there's 45 or 50 people on a unit. But sometimes we have 20 people, which is almost half of the individuals on that unit within our program sessions. So we've got these group sessions that take place twice a week, and again, for about 2 hours. And it's often interesting. We hear people saying, that they thought they had ADHD, or they've been told, this all of their lives. And when they're sitting down and paying attention and not fidgeting, or not even getting up to go to the bathroom for 2 hours, and each session, we have to question, is that diagnosis actually correct? And they're actually questioning, they're going to have to speak to, their counselor, or a social worker, or whomever, just based on, that diagnosis. And I think, when it's relevant, people will pay attention. So, I mean, that is one of the things that we've definitely, pointed out, just not just to our funders, but, to some of the evaluation and some of the academic partners that we have, that sometimes what we've been told isn't necessarily correct, and we often have to go above and beyond, and go that extra mile for it to for us to see that change, and to recognize that we can actually be who we want to be, and have that aspect of ownership and autonomy within our lives. So in terms of just some of the marketing strategies that we've been able to use within the space, because as they say, jail is obviously one of those spaces that has been pretty much toxic And it can definitely be toxic, but it can be actually also, what you make it out to be. So what we want to do, or what we do, is flood these spaces with collateral, in the sense of, giving them something to think about. Right. So as you can see on the left side of the screen, when people are getting out, those are the shoes that people are actually wearing in adult facilities. So if you're tired of walking in these shoes, there's different options. And, this is for people who've taken our program, but also for people who may be interested in, getting some of those supports outside of the program. So, we flood again, just the space with as much as we can in terms of positive messaging, and also giving their community, or their partners, or their members of the community, options as well, in terms of some of the stuff that we do in community that are not available in facility. And obviously, when they're able to do that, from entrepreneurship, we've got a program called Street Entrepreneurs. And we got different retreats that we've been able to do, and whatnot. And when their family and friends are able to partake in that, it ultimately builds not just resiliency, but capacity within community. We also offer what we call one-on-one support. And, again, intentionally, we wanted to have about 8 people about for each person to meet with. But that is actually, I would say, quadrupled, because once one person has that support and they see it working for themselves, word spreads like wildfire, and it becomes pretty viral very quickly within these spaces. And we offer a lot of one-on-one support. Almost everybody in these sessions gets some aspect of one-on-one support, and that can vary from helping them with their release plan, to helping them write their notion of when they're going to be sentenced. Right. So it varies. And, they definitely are appreciative, because obviously the provincial staff who are providing supports, there's only so much of them, and there's a lot of individuals. So I definitely think we are supplementing and augmenting what they're already actually doing. So when people are released, we have, as I mentioned, this life stabilization process where they actually meet people prior to release and build that rapport, build that relationship. But one of the things that we recognize is that after 5 o'clock, after their parole or probation officers or some of those traditional supports are, gone home and, turned off the phones, often people will get in situations or needs extra support. So we've developed something called Live After 5. And that is where people who we've been working with, and again, word spreads pretty quickly, who find themselves in situations, are able to call us for support. And it varies from people needing a food card, or for people who feel like they need to go and get revenge on the person who might have snitched on them or robbed them last night at the poker game. Right. So it again all is empowerment based, and we're able then to enable people to make decisions that are going to be best for them. And we find that it's an integral part of the programming that we do, because often what happens in community is often that much more, like, obviously has the potential to do more harm than actually in the facilities. So this is a huge part of what we do in sense of that Live After 5. And for supports. And often a lot of the individuals that we work with may not be, on, 311, or, being able to tap into some of those traditional supports that are there for community, just based on their lifestyle. And in doing this, we're developing an app with Humber College right now that will have, it'll be pretty much very user friendly, and it'll have the resources that are available in your community. I guess it'll have some aspect of like that Uber, being close in terms of where you are to find those supports that you may need at that point in time. So again, another area where we've heard from several people that they're not familiar or aware of the supports that are available into the community, and app will hopefully start to fill some of that void. And I know we're going close to time now, but we also have this RV, and I guess this is our jewel right now. And it says driving change across communities. And this is our Urban Rez Solutions community mobile unit, and where we're able to see people in the city of Toronto and the GTA. And often we may work with Toronto, the city of Toronto, and for instance, with the crisis response program or public health or Toronto Social Services, going to communities and having this unit available. And often where there's deserts in the city of Toronto, where there's no community center or there's no available space to meet within, like say, within an apartment complex, our mobile unit has now fulfilled that need or filled that void in terms of being able to fill some aspect of a safe space to meet. And we literally got it on the road well last summer, and this summer we were busy in 7 communities 5 days a week, and communities that had been identified by the city of Toronto and also Toronto Police in the sense of having higher rates of gun violence. So we were in those communities and everywhere in between with the mobile unit, imparting more so public safety, but also using that entrepreneurship as a lens towards seeing the potential that lies within the individual. So it also is a space where we have a studio, an audio-visual suite, and also just like a presentation space for when we're able to, have guest speakers in or just to be able to speak with those individuals and their community. And we also have a counseling or a private space at the back of the unit if need be for that private consultation, or when there's a crisis, like gun violence where there's no place to meet, we would also double it up to have a safe space for family and crisis counselors and whatnot to meet in this mobile unit. So we call it Safe 6. That's the name for the mobile unit. So again, this is what we do. A little bit of, again, mentorship, cultural belonging, and building pathways towards economic independence, but also still using that as a voice for violence prevention and community capacity building. So that's a little bit of our team here. So this is actually a session with some of the young people on the mobile unit, and again, it doubles as a space for community, but also for those people who are impacted by the criminal justice system. And often in our communities, there's often not much of a line between somebody who's either impacted or a family member or along those lines. So it has definitely been something that has been very well received, and it's now pretty much recognizable. Yeah, I'll just skip forward just a little bit. So again, these are some of the communities that we worked on during the summer: Driftwood, Grand Ravine, which are both in the Jane and Finch community; Elm Bank, which is in the Rexdale community; Orton Park, Glamorgan, Candlish, and Danzig, which are all in Scarborough. And we would be there on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes in the evening, if we get a call, we would go and respond accordingly with the City of Toronto. So just based on some of the street entrepreneurs that we've helped, not just necessarily on the mobile unit, but in sense of just working with community. We've trained over 200 individuals in terms of entrepreneurship. Over 70% have completed the program, and 60% of them started businesses. And again, this is just for the street entrepreneurs, and this is what we're pushing a lot when it comes down to the mobile unit. And I believe this is the last slide, and then I know we're pushed for time, but some of the participants um, that have taken our programming or that we engage with, we don't intentionally have a cutoff date. So I mean, a lot of times, with organizations, you finished your programming, and it's pretty much like a warm handoff. But we see that relationships, when they're positive, when they're professional, they don't need to have a cutoff. They need not. So we often have relationships that from the time we started, we still have. And this individual, or actually not this individual, but past participant had talked about that they definitely recognize the value of the program, and they think that it's definitely one of the pieces that are needed in terms of the puzzle to break the cycle of crime and that social transformation. And on that note, I'm gonna say that's my story and stick to it. Any questions, qualms, queries, quagmires? I'm definitely willing to take those on now.
Thank you so much, Roderick. And I just want to note for participants, if you'd like to put questions in the chat, we can read them out as well. You can raise your hand or, take unmute and ask any questions that you may have. But I just wanted to personally thank you for that fantastic presentation and inspiring work that you're doing. Really, yeah, just fantastic. And oh, I have some questions coming in already.
All right. And just before we get to the questions, we actually just recently started a new initiative. It's called Clothes for Court, and it's with Brands for Canada, which is another nonprofit organization or charity where we provide clothing for persons going to court, or actually once they've been released for interviews or jobs or anything else along those lines. And again, it has been very, very well received. I've got to add that slide within this, but it's another one of the supports that we recognize where there was a void. And obviously, even if you're going for bail and you don't have proper clothes on, sometimes perception or that impression could last a long time, especially if you're in an orange jumpsuit going to court. So that's another one of the services that we provide.
Leanne is asking, are there any therapists on staff for the clients?
We do have registered social workers on site. We don't have enough, but we definitely are. We partner, and we work in community more so with those individuals, because everybody who comes into the facilities obviously has to be vetted, and has to have their vulnerable sector checks and everything else. But we're definitely open to having more therapists, and we know that there is a need, but also with working within the actually facilities, because there's social workers who do that work there. Sometimes we just have to be careful not to step on any toes just based off of what the province is already offering. But there is a reality that there is a need for more therapists, especially within the facilities.
Jan from JHS, John Howard Society, Ottawa, asked, you're a social enterprise. Where does the funding come from?
So the majority of our work, and a great question, the majority of our work is funded by government. So either municipal, federal, or sorry, municipal, provincial, or federal. And we actually just recently started a new arm, and I didn't get a chance to put that in either. It's called Tidy Up Time. And I can probably find the slides, but basically what it is, it's an initiative where we're able to now employ some of the people where we're working with who are in community, just in the sense of looking for a pathway towards not just employment, but entrepreneurship. So it's pretty much cleaning. Like right now, as we know, there's tons of leaves on the ground, right? And we've got people now, and we've just got our insurance and everything else for our that aspect of it. So to go to communities in different neighborhoods, door knocking, flyering, and if you want your leaves picked up, or just simple cleaning where there's not a lot of skill sets and whatnot. But we literally just started that off, and so the money that we're raising from that obviously would go right back into the embellishing more equipment and hiring more people so that they also understand, the people who are working with us, or in this case within that social enterprise, understand the model. So it's an empowerment model, so that they're able to now see that how business works, how they can play a part within it. So the people who are door knocking obviously would be those individuals who may, have never had a job, or may, want to have their own enterprise or their own business in days to come. So it's giving them that actual experience, but actually also the knowledge and know-how and how to do customer service, how to engage, how to effectively communicate, and how to even negotiate when it comes down to working with customers. So we just literally got that off the floor, but that's the social enterprise aspect of what we're doing right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Roderick. And unfortunately, that is time. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. And Roderick, thank you for, again, the wonderful presentation and really inspiring successes and work that you're doing. So much
Right.
appreciate your time today.
Right. And I know I didn't get to answer all the questions, and I definitely am open to doing so. So if you would like, my email address is right here, rod@urbanresolutions.com. And yeah, we're definitely open. We believe that partnering and we call collective action partnerships is the only way to do this work effectively and efficiently. And in doing that, we're definitely open to making more partners and having a bigger impact on this demographic that we work with, and making difference. So thank you very much for having me. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.